All right, so here is my spoiler review on the Batman. Now, it's interesting, I actually did go back and see the movie again in preparation of doing this, spoiler review, and I wanted to see what my feelings were after seeing it again. The first time I saw it, I was very tired. I was still very excited to see it, but I was, I was tired. So I wanted to get a fresh look at the movie and really dig into some of the stuff that I saw. Now, with my original review, I could tell you that I was eviscerated online by a lot of people. You get to see how hateful the internet is when you start mentioning the things you don't like about something that people are passionate about, which is completely insane. People talk about the Snyder fans being, disrespectful and crazy. Well, I saw far more hate and vitriol coming from the fans of this movie than I have seen for anything else in a long time. And it was just kind of crazy, some of the responses that I got. I still stand by what I said in my original review, that I think he is out there too much. He wasn't covert enough in the film. And people got after me saying almost every shot he was coming out of the shadows. And yeah, there were a few shots where he was coming out of the shadows, but at the beginning when he went after those guys, the scene at the very beginning is when he goes and beats up those guys dressed with, Joker makeup. And he doesn't covertly go in and start taking these guys down. He slowly walks in there, slowly walks up to them and starts beating the crap out of them. That's kind of the whole movie. Everywhere he went, when he walked in, with Commissioner Gordon with the police in the apartment, he walks in super slow. Anytime he went anywhere, he was just super slow. It's kind of weird. It's a weird creative decision. So I wanted to get that off my chest here. That is still my really only major complaint with the film. I want to talk about the spoilers in there, and this movie is chock full of spoilers. Now, in my original review, I did say that this was a take off of Year One. And what I meant was The Long Halloween, not Year One, The Long Halloween. This is a new take on that storyline. But there were a lot of things sprinkled in here. So let's talk about the first of these spoilers that I saw. Well, first of all, we had the senator or the mayor being killed at the beginning of the movie, and there were some really weird looks that Bruce gave to his son throughout the thing, and I'm thinking, is this kid going to end up being Robin type of thing? And you got that vibe. Looking at the kid, he looks like he could be a Robin, and that's kind of the vibe I got when there were those couple of shots in the movie where Bruce was definitely looking at him for a very specific reason. And he felt for the kid because the kid had his father killed, and he wasn't an orphan. I think he still had his mom. But he felt for the kid, and he did at the funeral as well when he had to save him from almost being run over by the car that the Riddler had sent in there. So that was kind of interesting. That was one little spoiler thing that was brought up. Now, there were several times where you thought they were going to full-on bring in the Court of Owls into the storyline. There was one time when Batman got a card and it was an owl on the front, and you're thinking, ooh. And even with how this unraveled and the Riddler saying he wanted to dig deep into the history of the corruption there in Gotham City, you thought maybe something would have been revealed when it came to the Court of Owls. And he also did send another card later that had a couple of owl eyes in it. So they were definitely hinting at some stuff there as well. The other interesting thing they hinted at was Hush, okay? This was, and I'm surprised they didn't go on full-on Hush with this, and I thought that's where they might be going at the end of the first time I saw this. And the second time I paid attention, and man, they really easily could have made the Riddler, part of this whole Hush thing, because they talk about the Wayne Foundation, the renewal program, how that was set up for the orphans there in Gotham City. And we know from Falcone that, everybody, once the Waynes died, every corrupt person in Gotham tried to take a piece of renewal to use it as kind of a shield, And it was crazy because there was when Falcone had these people killed for the Waynes, which he didn't do it for the Waynes. He actually did it as a way to, get rid of the Waynes. But he wanted him in their pocket, or he wanted the Waynes in his pocket. And when he realized that wasn't going to happen, Falcone had them killed. And so this isn't, his parents were not killed by some random guy on the street. This was one of those things where, in the movie they make it do seem, and this was one of the fears I had going into the movie, that they were going to make Bruce's parents out to be the bad guys. And I don't want to see the Waynes be the bad guys, because that's the whole reason Batman does what he does, is to avenge his parents' death and to ensure that this never happens with anybody else. And so I'm glad they were able to reel that back in and show that Falcone actually did orchestrate this whole thing to go after the Waynes. Now, at the time that these that this was all going down, Wayne was being investigated by this reporter, something Elliott. Now, in the original Hush storyline, it was one of not Bruce's, but his dad's, Thomas's, colleagues, who was also a surgeon. His last name was Elliott. And we do know that his son, in the Hush comic storyline, that his son, Elliott's son, actually befriended Bruce Wayne, and that's kind of where the whole Hush storyline comes from. And you almost got that sense that they could have easily gone that route with this, because with the reporter that was actually killed in investigating Bruce Wayne, and Falcone had this, this reporter killed, you saw that, the Riddler said Hush, on the screen and everything, and Elliott's name was right there on the TV. So you got this big sense that they might be going towards this Hush storyline. So that's interesting. Now, there are two minor other things I want to talk about. Well, they're not minor things, but two other big spoilers I want to talk about in the movie. And then I'm going to talk about what we can expect for the future of this franchise. One of the big revelations in the film is that Catwoman was actually the daughter of Falcone, that her mom actually had a relationship and Falcone wanted nothing to do with her. Obviously, as an adult, Falcone had no idea who she was, but she did stick around the Iceberg Lounge and the 44 Below, which is the underground thing there, inside the Iceberg Lounge. She stuck around because she felt like she was owed, and she was. And Bruce definitely felt for her in the movie, and I loved her relationship with Bruce in this. It was just like it is in the comic, where she kind of toes the line, and Bruce tries to make her keep her honest. And I really love that. I thought it was really good how their relationship was played out, and I hope she comes back for the sequels that are definitely coming. And in fact, there's one big story thing I'm going to talk about at the end after this next one. Now, this next one is really interesting. I noticed this immediately the first time I saw it, and I paid very close attention the second time I saw it. There's a scene in the movie towards the end where Batman gets shot in the chest with a shotgun, and it does knock him down and almost makes him unconscious. Well, it does make him unconscious. He can't really move from the blast. And that's when Catwoman has to save him, and then somebody attacks Catwoman, and he has to get up to save her, but he doesn't have the energy, so he reaches down and grabs some neon green fluid from his batsuit and injects it into him. Now, people online have been debating about this. They said it's adrenaline. It's definitely adrenaline. It's not adrenaline. There's no way that that's adrenaline, and here's why. Adrenaline can get you pumped up and strong, but it's not going to make you rage. The only thing in the Batman universe that is going to make you strong and rage is venom. And we don't know Batman's backstory. We don't get any of that in this movie, and he easily could have been addicted to this stuff or found this stuff when he was getting trained as Batman. So there's definitely an Easter egg there, and it definitely gets people talking. We have the Joker also introduced at the end. This Barry Cogan, I don't know how you say his last name, was rumored to be in the movie, and he's just titled as an unseen, basically a guest there in Arkham Asylum. And it's definitely the Joker. I didn't care for his laugh or really his look, but if that's what, it's creative decision definitely by Reeves to go, Matt Reeves to go in that direction. And we may see more of him in the future. I kind of hope we don't see a lot more of him. I don't need to see another version of the Joker. I think we've had those. I think it's time to focus on some other characters. I would like to see the Court of Owls, and I would like to see possibly Mr. Freeze come in and done the right way. Mr. Freeze is my favorite villain because of the emotional connection that the audience can have with that character if they do it the right way. So that's what I'm kind of hoping for the future. Now, the last big thing I want to talk about as far as a spoiler in the movie is they also roped in a massive storyline that came out about 15 years ago, which was the No Man's Land. The end of this movie is very dire, and Batman even admits that the city is in worse shape than when he started because of the dam breaks and, all around the city, and water just kind of floods everything. And they're bringing in the Coast Guard, not the Coast Guard, whatever you call it. They were bringing in basically reinforcements to lock down the city. There were curfews and everything, and they made the point that this is where, we know Penguin's going to take his shot to Falcone gets killed in the movie, so we know the Penguin's going to come into power after this. So we know where that's all headed. I hope there's a pretty big time jump between this film and the next film, and here's why. And everybody argued with me on this online. They said the reason he wasn't as covert is he's not trained enough. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're new, I think you're going to be more covert than possibly the guy who's been trained and knows how to do the ins and outs. I think Batman overall was just too out in the open in this movie. And in the next film, number one, he's going to have to get bigger. When he didn't have his shirt on in a couple of scenes, he was very skinny. He didn't have a whole lot of muscle on his body. And so he is going to need to bulk up, number one. Number two, they're going to have to make him more experienced. I would like to see a 3, maybe 4-year time jump with the next film because they need to bulk him up and he needs to become more experienced. We can't have an inexperienced Batman for 2 or 3 movies, especially if they want to make this a trilogy. We're going to have to see that growth with Batman from here on out. So there is definitely a sequel coming, and they definitely have storylines they can pull from. They can definitely pull from the Court of Owls, the Venom storyline, No Man's Land, and even the Hush storyline. So Matt Reeves has talked about using another, possibly using Mr. Freeze, and I would love to see that. Maybe have the next movie focus on the Penguin and Mr. Freeze. I think that would be fantastic if that's the route they went. But we need an experienced Batman. We can't have 2 movies of this guy who's fairly new at this anymore. We need to see some real honest growth in his character because I don't like seeing him, go in the wingsuit and almost kill himself and other stuff. He needs to have better equipment and a better way to get around the city if that's where they're going to go in the future. Now, what's interesting is Matt Reeves came out the other day and, he was being quizzed on the GCPD show that was supposed to come out on HBO Max. With the pandemic and there a whole year that this movie had to wait to get released, would have been a great time to release that Gotham City Police Department show on HBO Max, but he has confirmed now that show has completely evolved. And now it is going to be an Arkham series instead of a GCPD. That could be interesting. There are definitely some stories they could tell. I don't know how they would tell those stories without Batman, so I don't know if they're going to have Batman in it, but we're going to see where that leads very shortly. We can see that Warner Brothers is banking on this, but they're not going to be in charge here in the next month. So we're going to see, what is going to happen with this franchise going forward. I loved the movie. I don't want people to think I didn't like the movie. I still give it, I bumped it up a half a star. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. I can't give it 5 because he was just too inexperienced for me. I didn't like how slow he would walk into the scenes and how he was also not covert enough. I just didn't care for that. Not to say there weren't some scenes where he did some cool stuff. I mean, when he blew up in the Coliseum, the roof, and then fell in was pretty awesome. Also, when he was hiding up in the corner in the hallway when he was getting shot at in the chest. But at the same time, I don't know how he got up in that corner because they were looking at this the whole time. So looking down the hallway the whole time. So I don't know how he would have gotten up there. It just doesn't logistically make sense. But was still a cool scene. So there were some scenes where he was covert and did some Batman stuff. But definitely the exception, not the rule in the movie. People need to become more civil online. I can tell you that. I've been pointing out stuff and it's just people get so angry that you don't agree with them and don't think that this is a perfect movie because it is certainly not a perfect movie. The third act could have been much better, had a little more action, just a little more well-written to round out the whole story, but it still was not a bad movie. It's probably one of the best comic book movies ever written. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes in the future. So I love Batman, still my favorite DC character. I know this character inside and out. All those storylines, I own all of those comics. I do own about 5,000 comics in regards to Batman. So I've been reading Batman since 1987. And yeah, I've read all these storylines. I'm very familiar with them. I have the original issues of Hush, and I have all the No Man's Land stuff. I don't have the original issues. I gave a lot of stuff away in the past, but I do have for the No Man's Land, I have the trade paperbacks for those. That's a story I'm probably going to go back and reread. I did enjoy that storyline back when it was originally released, and I haven't read it since. I've read Hush many times, and Venom many times as well. So they could easily bring Bane into this. The point is, there's lots of areas they could go with this going into the future. I do look forward to seeing a sequel, and I really hope that they do Batman more justice in these coming up sequels. We know they're going to happen. Now, it was funny, the amount of money this movie made over the weekend. I think they had anticipated more. Worldwide, it made about $258 million, I think, worldwide. And what's funny is everyone talks about how it's the biggest domestic Warner Brothers opening since the pandemic started, which is not hard to do since they released first of all, the first year there were no movies released, and then last year all the big releases were day and date with HBO Max. So you can't compare it with anything. As far as Batman releases go and everything, it barely beat out Batman Begins, but Batman Begins actually gained steam because that's when Batman, the enthusiasm for the character was at an all-time low, because the last iterations we had from that were the Schumacher movies, which are just, ridiculous movies. They're fun to watch, but it's campy, just like the 66 series was, but not my kind of Batman. But Batman Begins was definitely an experience. And I remember I wasn't excited to see Batman Begins. I went with some friends and I walked out. We loved the movie. It was incredible. I remember the experience. This was not that same experience. This movie was very different. Well written, well acted. I just don't like the portrayal of Batman specifically. Creative decision by Reeves. It has nothing to do with Pattinson or anything like that. So I give the movie 4 out of 5 stars. I'd love to hear what other people's thoughts were. The spoilers are very interesting, and the little story threads. Matt Reeves did pile it high on this movie. In a 3-hour movie, he definitely piled it on high. So there's lots of areas that this could go in the future. And I look forward to seeing those. All right, how many times have you guys seen the movie? I've seen it twice now. I may go back one more time, but it's going to be a month or so down the road. I got to give it a little time to simmer. And then that will definitely be it until it gets released. I do appreciate the support. We'll see you guys on the next video.